Hey guys, welcome back to the Unleashed podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Rieger, and today we're chatting with my good friends, Larry and Sue Pruett. Larry and Sue have been on my show before when it was called Streams of Income, and they have an e-commerce background just like me. They're still very much involved in the e-commerce world, and they were my main coaches for the Legends group that I had when I was teaching people how to make money on Amazon. They're incredible folks, and they we're on the show because they've launched a new marriage ministry, and the Lord has called them into that. They did a Bible, right? Actually, they did a Sunday school class at their church several years ago, about 10 or 11 years ago, and they just felt the call then to do this marriage ministry thing, and it's the timing is now right for that, and they're launching it. It's called Genesis 224, and they're giving away some awesome connection cards. And we talked about on this episode about just the importance of connecting with your spouse, and they make it really practical. And so they've got some free connection cards that you can use that will just start and facilitate conversations with your spouse. If you go to gen224marriage.com/connect, that's Gen for Genesis 224marriage.com/connect. You can get those free downloads. But in this episode, we talked about surviving being married as a couple when you're working together as entrepreneurs. Talked about what if one is more of a dreamer and the other one is just not quite there on that and not that visionary. How do you work that out? That's a very key one because if you're an entrepreneur like me, it can be you're always thinking about new ideas. You're always dreaming big, and to have a spouse that supports you in that is so awesome. And then what do you do if your spouse is just not quite on board with some of the dreams that you have? We talked about that. So that's very practical stuff. The importance of deep connection, facing challenges side by side. The challenges aren't usually between the two of you. It's outside forces that are, attacking, and how do you stand side by side together to combat those? Encouraging each other, dreaming together, a lot of practical stuff and how to connect with your spouse in a meaningful way. And I know this is really going to bless you, especially if you're married. Here is my interview with Larry and Sue. Hey, Larry and Sue, welcome back to version 2 of Streams of Income, which is now unleashed.
Hi, Ryan. Thanks so much for having us today.
So
Yeah, we're
awesome.
excited about this. Excited about your new branding and such. This is really
Yes.
cool.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, it's so fun to have people back on that have been on before, but a different subject. But as always, I still love hearing people's stories. And so some people are probably have not heard the first episode we did. So tell us how you guys got to where you are and what you're all doing.
You want me to start?
Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
We should rehearse that, but
That's okay.
so really kind of the story around our current business is we really started feeling a burden to do what we're doing now way back when we were engaged.
That's awesome.
It is.
Yeah.
We got engaged, and we were kind of surprised. When you get engaged, you get all excited and you're thrilled, and you think everybody's gonna be happy for you that you're getting married, and
Uh-huh.
everybody's gonna be just happy go lucky.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of that, but we also encountered quite a few people who were kind of Debbie Downers about it. They were like, you're happy now, but just wait until you're married, and you're gonna be miserable, basically.
Oh my gosh.
Kind of the implication they made. And even then we were saying, oh, these people have the wrong idea of what marriage is supposed to be, but we weren't married
Yeah.
yet, so we didn't say too
Right.
much out loud.
And I would
Right.
just say that we've had really great examples in our life.
Absolutely.
So my parents are in their 80s and still married. They've been married for 60 plus years.
Yes.
Sue's parents are not too far behind.
Right.
And so we've had great examples of what
Yes.
biblical marriage looks like. And so we just kind of expected that.
Yeah.
And, we realize that different people have different experiences, right?
Yeah.
And so divorce is rampant in our society. And unfortunately, so many people have been stung by that. And so I think that may be the source of a little bit of some of the discouragement that we got of just like, you guys are being unrealistic, but we're like, no, we're the realistic ones.
Yes.
And so very early on, we began to feel a burden to both be an example of what a godly marriage is supposed to look like and show the world how Christ and his church are supposed to be represented through marriage. but then also we wanted to encourage others to do the same. And so we have had opportunities here and there, a little bit here and there. And then about 10 years ago, we got the opportunity to teach a Sunday school class at our church. And it was one of those kind of, it felt like as it was happening, it felt like it was kind of a once in a lifetime experience, just the way the Lord was moving in the people who were in the class, the way that he brought lessons to our mind and how he showed us to teach and everything was just incredible.
And really how that came about is that we did have a couple of divorces in our church, and it's just a small little country church. And so that was kind of a shocking thing in our little community.
Yeah.
And the pastor stood up on a Sunday night and just said, we as a church need to do something about this. And Sue was not there that evening for some reason. She's probably home with sick kids or who knows what. But I went up to the pastor afterwards and I said, I know Sue and I know her heart. And so I can volunteer us to help out, to help you with whatever you have planned.
Yeah.
And he said, well, what I've got planned is for you and Sue to teach a Sunday school class. And I was like, hold on a second. No. I am supporting you. We're behind you 100% of the way, not up in front, but that's just how the Lord worked that out. And we were prepared for it. And yet that really wasn't our plan. That was his plan. And so just the process of going through it, literally it was 10 years ago that we were preparing ourselves because we started in January of 2015. And so all of that time was just like, okay, this is what the Lord has been preparing us for all of these years.
That's amazing.
And then we taught the class. Got some really good feedback. And we had one guy in particular came up to us and said, okay, what's next? We're like, I don't know. I'm exhausted. That was 4 months of a lot of work. And he was like, you need to take this thing on the road. And And so we did start thinking about what is next. What would the Lord have us to do here?
And 9.5 years later, here we are.
That's awesome. I love it. So it's been like brewing for that long. You knew something was coming, but you just didn't know when.
Yes.
Wow. How'd you know that now? And we can talk about a lot of stuff, but I'm just curious. How'd you know that now was the time?
Well, okay. So fast forward then to earlier this year, and that the same guy who said, what's next? He's actually been just a dear friend of ours, and he has been very encouraging in our business all along, helping us with kind of branding and just different things. And so earlier this year, we were just on a call together, and I was kind of, to be honest with you, I was just griping. Any Amazon seller out there, you probably know, you could probably say, I bet he was griping about this, that. Yes. And I was just saying, it's just we're beating our heads up against the wall. It's a challenge. It's a struggle. And he said, Larry said, I hear you, and all that's like legitimate, everything you're dealing with. And he said, but whatever happened to your ministry focus in your business? And I kind of went, wait a minute, you're supposed to just say, you're right, Larry, No, he's a dear friend, and I was so glad that he challenged me on that. And he knew the backstory. He knew all of that we were ministry focused. And yes, we were doing this through a business. But we were doing it not just to earn money. We were doing this to serve the Lord and to impact lives. And he said, all I hear is all of the downside, and I get it. But I just really challenge you to start getting back to ministry focus.
Wow.
And so actually back in February, we did really, we launched this, but here we are in September and really just kind of getting some momentum going with it a little bit. But yeah, that's really why now it's like the timing is not really great, but we've realized there's been 9.5 years of not really great timing. And so we're just going to do it.
So were you like in the back, like if we would have talked 4 years ago about this, what would you have said? I'm just curious, like, because where I'm going at with this is there's other people that have had dreams that they knew that God's called them to do something, but is it just trying to weigh, is God waiting on me, or am I waiting on God for the perfect timing? Just trying to think through that. What does that look like? Do you feel like in hindsight you should have acted 5 years ago on this, or do you feel like now is the actual right time that God is like launching you into this?
I kind of feel a little bit like it's kind of like planting a tree. Like the ideal
Yeah.
time to have done this would have been right after we taught the Sunday school class. Everything was fresh. We were kind of riding, the wave of the spiritual, I don't know what you call it. I don't like to call it a high, but the spiritual encouragement that we had, during that time, and how we were able to, like, literally we had people coming to us saying, what you taught, what the Lord used you to teach, the Lord used that to save our marriage.
Wow.
We were going to divorce, and we came to the class, and the Lord used what you said to save our marriage. So that was the ideal time to do it. The second best time is right now.
Yes,
and so we're doing it now.
That's so
and
good.
so that's how I think about it. And we didn't really talk too much about, I mean, we finally feel also like we've got enough experience behind us. We can kind of speak with a little more authority that people will listen to.
Right.
We just celebrated our 35th wedding anniversary.
Awesome. Congratulations.
We've raised 5 kids. The youngest just turned 18 this year. And we kind of feel like, okay, this is when people start going, okay, you've been through pretty much everything except for retirement. And so now you have something to say, and we're listening. So
you have the credibility now. I mean, not that you didn't then, but just in other people's mind, you do.
Exactly.
That's so good.
Yeah, and we do have a heart for all married couples for sure, but we also have a heart for entrepreneurs.
Yes.
And so that's the other thing, is that we have been full-time entrepreneurs for 11 and a half years and been doing it at some level for about 20 years now. We're about to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the first thing that we sold online.
Awesome.
Which is kind of funny.
That is crazy.
So, so there's that aspect of things as well. And anytime you add something extra, like marriage is hard enough in and of itself, and just living in this fallen world is hard enough in and of itself. But whenever you add things like homeschooling on top of it, when you add entrepreneurship on top of it, it just gives some extra challenges. And so we've just weathered a lot. We've survived. And so somehow that gives us credibility.
Yeah. For sure. You guys work really well together. I've had other people that I know have said, I could not, there's no way that my wife and I could ever work together. We just would kill each other. Do you feel like there's probably, you guys just seem like the role models for this, but for those that would not be able to work with their spouse, is that okay? Are they just wired differently? Or do you feel like the ideal thing would be that you actually could live at home together and have a business together? Or do you guys just think you guys are uniquely called to do it this way?
I don't think I can speak as to how the Lord has wired other people. So
for
me, we have, I mean, from early in our marriage, we worked at the same company the first year we were married. We've worked together a lot, and then building the businesses together over the past 20 years. I can't imagine doing life any other way.
Yes.
But I'm sure there are people who can't imagine doing life the way we do it. So I think both are absolutely valid. I would never tell somebody, oh yes, you should absolutely start a business with your spouse and do this if you don't feel like you can, because you have to be committed and ready to go through a lot to be able to do this successfully. And if you're not in a space where you believe you can do it, then I don't know. I don't know if you could.
Yeah. And I would say the same thing as far as entrepreneurship. I mean, it's not 100% for everybody. We need really good employees out there. And I know in our business, we want some people who don't want to be entrepreneurs. They want to come and help us out and such. So yeah, I definitely think people are wired differently, and there are going to be some situations that it's just not going to be a great fit necessarily. With that said, I think if a married couple has this desire to work together, I feel very much as if they can do it, and that we can help them to navigate some of the challenges that come up.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's awesome. So the ministry is called Genesis, or Gen 224. Can we talk about that? What that means?
Yeah, sure. So Gen 224. So that's short for Genesis chapter 2, verse 24. And just in case somebody's not familiar with it, that verse says, "Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh." So we just love that verse. It just summarizes so much of what marriage is and what it's supposed to be. Two individuals, but working together to become one. And then of course that's quoted in the New Testament in Ephesians chapter 5 as well.
That's so good. When you guys are talking to people, what's the main main theme, or what are you helping people with, or maybe more specific, that Sunday school class? What was it? I mean, 'cause there's a lot of topics under marriage. That's very broad. And you said you
Mhm.
feel called to the help of the entrepreneur, for sure. And, so what are your main, like, if I had you come to a church and speak, what would the topic be other than, hey, we're going to come talk about marriage?
Yeah, well, we definitely focus on helping couples. Larry already talked about two individuals. You're unique. You're not the same person. You're unique. You've got personality. You've got love languages. You have all the things that make you who you are. But we want to help them gain some insights into each other and into their marriage so that they can move forward in the path that the Lord has them moving in.
Yes,
And we want
yes.
them to be confident as they step into that. And so beginning to understand and getting insight about who your spouse is, who you are, that when we went through that time, and we went through a very exciting time in our marriage where we began to look at things like personality and love language and all those things, that was super exciting to us because it really just did open up some other avenues of thought for us. It deepened our relationship and our connection to each other. And that is what we desire for all married couples, is that their connection would be deep and abiding and secure. And so that's really what we begin to help people focus on.
In some ways, it's kind of a list of things we wish we would have known.
Yeah.
Whenever
From the
we were
beginning.
from the beginning. And
Yes.
and again, there were so many times where we would be having some sort of a disagreement or whatever, and then I just could not understand where she was coming from.
Mm,
And then we started talking about like some of the things Sue mentioned, personality types and stuff. And then
mm,
so then later down the road, I was like, oh, okay, she just looks at life differently
yeah.
from this different lens. And then I started seeing that, like, wow, that's actually super valuable to me.
Hmm.
Because if the two of us are identical, then we're just going to see things the exact same way and we're going to make the same mistakes.
Yes.
And
Who was it? I think Larry Burkett said, if,
yeah,
if you're both identical, one of you is unnecessary.
yes.
Good
So
point. That's
yeah,
a
Yeah.
good
exactly.
point.
And so again, so we see from the very beginning of creation how
Mm,
God said it is not good for the man to be alone.
yes. Yes.
And he made Eve to connect with
Mhm.
Adam, and for the two of them then to become one complete
Mm,
um, person. And
yes.
and so together, then we see things differently, we approach things differently, and so that's kind of what we
Hmm.
like to walk people through, kind of down
Love
the
that.
pathway, so to speak.
Yeah.
And we gave it a cutesy little name of 2 + 2 = 4. So
Mm,
just going on that Genesis 2:2:4.
hmm.
And so then you've got the two individuals, the two insights leading to four impacts.
Mhm.
Mm.
So
That's so awesome. Do you have what are some examples of, like, for people that might be going through something, how you would help them, or maybe do anonymously, somebody from your marriage class that
Mhm.
what were they going through, and what did you teach them? Like that person you said that you saved their marriage. What was happening in that marriage, and what did you teach them that caused them to, like, now they're thriving?
Well, I want to give credit where it's due, because it wasn't
yes.
us; it was the Lord who saved their marriage. But
Yes.
the way that the big thing that we really helped people do was to study each other
Mhm.
and get to know your spouse really well. Because I think that we've heard many times that the key to a good relationship is communication.
Mhm.
Communication is a means to what is key, but what is really key is how deeply are you connected.
Mm.
If you are connected deeply enough, your relationship will survive anything that life throws at you.
Yeah.
And we do have an enemy who doesn't like to see healthy marriages either, and he will throw a lot at us. And so we want to help people begin to get that deeper connection to each other. And one of
Mm.
the ways we do that is we help reveal to each other, help them reveal to each other their deepest self, and
Yeah.
in a way that is, I guess, the kind of the buzzword now is safe. A
Mhm.
way that deepens that connection. And I know Larry can know every deepest, darkest secret, everything that's ugly about me, and he's not going to walk away because
Right.
he's committed to this marriage. He's made that commitment, and so.
Yes.
And one of the comments that we received from that class, and somebody was just very gracious to us to share this with us, but he said that I've always known this stuff. You know, he'd been raised in the church, and he said I've always known these verses, but what we were able to do is to, again, through God's grace, we were able to teach how to practically apply these to his life, is what he was talking about. And so, like, as an one example is there's a verse, 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 7, that says husbands are to live with their wives in an understanding way. And, you know, you can insert your own joke right here, right?
Right.
Because it's a real challenge. You know, the male mind is different than the female mind, and we think differently, and we, you know, just setting aside personalities and love languages and all those differences and backgrounds and experiences and such, but just how men and women think differently.
Yes.
And so how in the world am I supposed to understand my spouse? And I'm sure it goes both ways. But, you know, some of those things that we've talked about, walking people through the personality types and the love languages, and even further than that, like the talents that somebody has or the gifts that they have, and that's going to impact, you know, how they see different tasks and different, and, you know, career opportunities and all of that type of stuff. And so just by walking through that, and then by having some really good leading questions that we provide to couples that say, like, discuss this, and then go through this exercise together. One of the things that we encourage couples to do is to budget together. And so hopefully everybody does that, but it's kind of shocking how many people don't do that. And you're going to see, like, these differences of life, and what you're thinking is going to come out. And so those numbers on the paper are important, but what's really more important is that connection that you come away with through that type of a discussion.
That's so good. What are some of those questions you have them ask each other to connect well? I know you have a whole connection, a series of cards that you're giving away, but what are some of those, or any other tips for connecting well?
Some of it is focused on reliving good memories. So it might be a question like, you know, what's a favorite memory that you have from when we were dating? Or what's a favorite memory you have from a vacation we took, or something like that. So doing those kind of things, it's so important. And I will tell you that, to me, the key to all of it almost doesn't matter what questions you ask, but if you actually sit down and look each other in the eye, that's a connection. That's something that we just, in our busy lives, we just don't do much of. And I don't think you realize it until you do it. And then it's like, at first it's a little uncomfortable, like, ooh, you know, I'm not used to doing this so much. But then when you get really comfortable with it, then it just opens up, you're able to discuss anything.
And like, literally, we're talking about 2 minutes, 5 minutes, something like that, you know, can be super valuable. And I think as people get more comfortable with it and such, those conversations are going to be 15 minutes and 30 minutes and ongoing. But one of the other things that we really encourage couples to do is to dream together. I just think that is so important, that as a husband and wife, again, two individuals, but you're one flesh, so you need to be going the same direction. And if you do have two separate dreams, then you've got some more talking to do, and you need to work through some things there. But yeah, just a question like, if we had $1 million in the bank account right now, what would you do with your life? You know, so get rid of that one major problem that we all have, those pesky bills, you know. It's like, okay, that is resolved. So what would you want to do with your life? And then, you know, again, you may have two totally different thoughts, but as you start talking, then sometimes those can merge together. And that can be a really good framework to get started with a dream that you have together. And we've got some material on that, and this is kind of a dangerous thing to do, but coming soon, whenever we can pull that together, will be a book on that topic of dreaming together.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. What if one's a visionary and one's not so much? Like, oh, that sounds like way too crazy. Like, how are we ever going to do that?
I think one of the things that we want to help people do is to not be dream killers. You don't want to be a dream killer for your spouse. If your spouse has a dream and you haven't caught on to that vision yet, then I think it's wise to determine that you're not going to discourage it. You
Mm.
may not be ready to fully jump on board with it. You may
Yeah.
not be ready to say, okay, fine, let's quit the day job and go all in.
Yeah.
But I think it's fine to be encouraging to your spouse. And a lot of times it's the husband who's a little bit more adventurous in that area. And
Sure.
sometimes, a
Sure.
lot of times it's the wife. I mean, if we've
Yeah.
got children, we have a need to know that we're all secure, that we're all okay. But if you express to your husband your belief in him and say, well, I don't really understand it, but I know you could do it. You could absolutely do this. You could pull this off.
Yeah.
I think that is huge. And even if the roles are reversed, if you just say, I believe that you can do it. I'm not sure how yet. I don't have the same vision that you do yet, but just don't be a dream killer. That, to me, that's huge.
And
Yeah.
I just think also on that if the one who is the visionary,
Uh-huh.
you have to be very understanding that your
Mhm.
spouse needs a little bit more time
Mhm.
or whatever. But I think that's a really good follow-up question, is to say, okay, so here's what my dream would be, and you're not anywhere near that. So what would you need in order
Mm.
to come closer this direction?
That's good.
And so, for example, one of the things that we talk to couples about if they are preparing to leave a day job and going full-time into a business
Yes.
is we encourage them to sit down and to come up with a number, a number of months that they would need to have that many months worth of expenses in the bank.
Yeah.
All right. So if your expenses are this X dollar amount, you multiply that by however many months that
Mm-hmm.
both the husband and wife would be comfortable with.
So good.
And so sometimes for the person who's not the visionary, it's just a matter of security.
Yeah.
And so they may say, like, well, if we had 12 months worth of expenses in the bank account, then I would be fine with giving this thing a shot. And we'll give it a
Yeah.
shot for 6 months.
Yeah. Right.
and then we'll have a little bit of a buffer. And the visionary may go like, done. I
Yeah.
will
There
start
you go.
saving everything I can right now.
Yeah.
And then you've just got an immediate resolution. It may be a little bit more difficult than that, but that's one way, just to have that communication, some back and forth
Yeah.
discussion to see like what's at the heart of this, and then what can we do so that we're both satisfied.
Yeah. That's so good. This thing makes it so much easier when they're both believing spouses, right? I can't imagine
Yes.
doing this. Do you have any advice for somebody? It usually seems like it's the woman who's the Christian and the man is like, doesn't want to have anything to do with Jesus. Have you met with people like that had that situation either way? And or what would you say to somebody who's like, my husband's just not with me on me going to church, and
Mhm.
that's a whole different dynamic.
It really is. And scripture speaks so clearly to that. That's one of the things I'm really encouraged by, is that exact situation scripture is so clear on.
And that's 1 Peter 3:1-6, by the way.
Yeah. Thank you.
Right before the other verse that I referenced. Yeah.
But the whole thing that the wife is told is to respect her husband, show him deference,
Mhm.
be quiet. Like, without speaking a word, you can win him to the Lord. And so, obviously, praying for him, obviously being Christ-like towards him. It's not going to guarantee anything, but
Right.
scripture does say that that's what we're to do.
Yes.
And so, and depending on the specific circumstance, obviously there would be some specific recommendations, but
Sure.
just remaining close to the Lord, praying for your husband, inviting others that are also, they're going to be wise in how they do it, but inviting others to pray for him, and just living it out, just living your faith out. And honestly, that's how we reach every unbeliever.
That's
is
true.
we live our faith out, and we
So
let
true.
him shine.
Yeah, that's so true. Thank God we don't have that situation. Melane's been saved longer than I have, but I think our biggest problem, we have a great marriage. It sounds like it's much like yours. We haven't been married as long, 15 years, but the biggest thing for us is just me misunderstanding typically what she's saying, where she'll say something and to me, it sounds a certain way, and it's not how she meant it. And so when we first got married, we went to a marriage conference, and I don't remember, I could find the name later of the couple that did it. They have a book, and it was just that how the you just have to understand they love you, and so you have to we see things differently, and how she may say it this way, and to you it comes through your ears and it sounds maybe harsh, but that's not any even close to how she meant it. And so that's like our biggest thing. I'm thankful that like it's just that simple for us. Other
Mhm.
people have had it harder. We talked about a couple we both know, they multiple divorces, and now they
Yeah.
have an amazing marriage. But
Mhm.
I don't know. For me, I don't know if there's other people out there that has that same. I'm sure there are, where they just little things where you just hear it wrong.
Mhm.
But you just have to
Yeah.
know the heart of your spouse is for you.
Exactly. Oh,
Yeah.
that's a great way to say it. And I think another key there is to start out assuming the best.
Yeah,
Yeah. Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, and just like what you had said earlier about that, communication is key, no doubt.
Hmm.
But if you are connecting, then the communication happens. And
Yes,
so, like, for example, in that situation, just asking some follow-up questions.
Yes.
yes, yes,
Here's what I think that I heard. Am I right about that?
yes.
And that's so hard to do whenever things are busy, and sometimes maybe that comment or that question was thrown over the shoulder as she was walking out the room, and you're like, hey,
Yes.
well, I've got a follow up.
Yes, that's so good.
And
Like an example might be like you guys work from home too, and I work from home. So I enjoy actually going to the grocery store. It gets me out of the house. And so like I might have a list. She puts stuff on our on the Alexa device that we have, and I'll pull it up, and she might put something on there that's I don't know, just an example, cabbage. But or maybe it's a canned good, and I come with the wrong brand or something,
yeah,
and when she says I would have gotten this brand or I meant this brand, to me sometimes it sounds like, oh, you're the worst grocery shopper ever. I can't believe that you're actually doing it. And I know she doesn't mean that, but I just hear it sometimes that way, and like, well, I'm the one that went grocery shopping, she should be
Yeah.
thankful. And it never escalates into an argument, but
Yeah.
it could.
Yeah.
But that's like
Uh-huh.
thank God, that's our biggest issue
Yeah.
is me
Hmm.
misunderstanding, and probably the same way with her. I probably say
Right.
things too that she misunderstands.
Yeah.
yeah. As far as issues go, that's like you said, that's a good one to have if that's your
Yeah,
your biggest challenge, But
absolutely.
but yeah, the whole communication thing is key to everything in life, and just building the relationship. And
Mm,
so there's just, it's a lifelong pursuit.
Hmm.
And
yes,
so that's the journey that we're on, and
absolutely.
we enjoy that, and we enjoy helping other couples as well. So
What are some of the things, like if you could go back to yourselves, 35 years ago and 25 years ago and 15 years ago, what are some of the things that you would tell yourselves?
I would definitely tell us not to listen to those people that were so discouraging,
Mhm.
because that was part of, I don't think Sue even really got into that. We heard those discouraging words from being engaged, but then once we got married, then people were kind of like, oh, you're sickeningly happy. It's like
Yeah,
and some of this was inside the church even, which was even
mm,
more discouraging. But they're like, just wait till you've been married for a year,
yeah,
and then all that newness wears off and stuff. and
yeah,
and then once we were happy after a year, then they'd say, oh, just wait till 5 years.
right.
And then it was wait till you have kids, and then
Hmm.
they stop,
Yeah.
all the discouraging words. But I definitely would have said, don't be discouraged by that. um, just, what is true. And there's all these lies that we believe in this world, and there's all these lies we believe as married couples. And
Mm,
I would tell myself back then, don't listen to those lies, because
yes, yes.
it probably robbed some of our joy, because there was just like, well, I'm really happy, but I guess
Mm,
it's not going to be like this for very
Yeah.
long. And
Hmm.
that's just silly
right.
for me to think about it now.
Hmm. Hmm.
So yeah.
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 I think another thing that we learned a little bit later, um, I think we kind of practiced it, but once we got this word picture in our mind, it became really clear is whenever you are encountering some kind of a challenge or a problem or a big
Mhm,
hairy issue,
mhm.
it feels like a fight when you're going through something like that.
Yeah.
Just remember to fight shoulder to shoulder against the problem,
Mm,
not facing each other and fighting each other. Because
good.
when you're facing an issue, facing a problem,
Mm,
more likely than not, your spouse is not the enemy in this situation.
yes.
They're not the one who is desiring evil for you or anything like that. And when you see a problem as outside of your relationship that you need to deal with together, it is a lot easier to fight it and a lot easier to overcome it because what's that verse talk about? Three strands are not easily broken. So when you're tied together and the Lord is the center of your relationship, you literally can overcome anything.
Yes, amen.
And that's scary to say sometimes because after you make a statement like that, sometimes something big will come along. But we've been through some pretty big things and we have overcome them by God's grace. And so getting that word picture was huge for me.
Yeah, that whole side by side, shoulder to shoulder type of an approach, because, a lot of people, we think about the financial aspect of things. That is probably one of the top things that impacts marriages in a bad way. And so a lot of that, though, it comes from maybe one of the spouses is the spender and the other is the saver. And so then if, as Dave Ramsey said, if there's too much month at the end of the money, then then it's a situation where that spouse could easily blame the spender and just say, you're spending too much. Well, maybe they are. Maybe that is a true, accurate statement. But the problem is that there's not enough money or there's too much expenses. And so once you identify that that's where the problem is, then you just, that's where the two of you have to, in a mature way, have to sit down and say, like, let's look at these numbers because it's not working. And so somehow, some way, we need to come to an agreement on how much money we have available to spend in what categories. And then, of course, it takes discipline to follow through with that and such. But that's just one example. The problem is not really the spender. I mean, again, at some level, there could be some challenges there, and that person needs to change some behavior. But the problem is the money. The problem is the budget. So the two of you working together on that is the approach that, like what Sue said, once we learn that, it's like, oh, that has really helped us just time and time again.
That's so good. Well, what else have we not talked about that you want to get across, that you want to make sure that we talk about or that you share?
What else you got?
Well, I think that one of the, we just specifically, we've talked with married couples who are in business together. That's kind of become a focus for us. And it's the heart that we have because we see businesses put a lot of pressure sometimes on a marriage. And just what Larry talked about just now, approaching problems together is huge. But I think that, one of the things that we talk about is people want to know, when is it time to take the leap? And so Larry talked a little bit about the bank account, but I love the story that you tell about how kind of one of the moments that you had that really pushed you to say, okay, we need to do something different.
Okay, yeah. So a little bit of story time here. I can tell it really quickly, but I had a day job. This goes back probably 12, 13 years ago, since we've been full-time for 11 and a half years. But at the day job, it was one of those things where I would work a so-called late schedule on Monday and Tuesday, and early schedule Wednesday and Thursday. Friday was just kind of a catch-up type of a day. So it ended up morphing to me just working, all day for those 4 days. It was from 7:30 in the morning until whatever time at night, whenever I'd get home. But this particular story happened at a time where it was during the winter time of the year. And so I'd kind of go to work and it was dark, and I'd come home and it was dark, which was very disorienting to me. And I used to just hate that so much. I know a lot of people out there can resonate with that. And so this particular day, I was leaving work, and I was walking down the sidewalk toward my truck, and it was dark. And all of a sudden I was just like, I don't even know what time of day it is. Like, is this an early day? Is this a late day? What even time of day is this? And so I'm driving home totally disoriented, which is great. Right. But I was trying to think through, like, when I get home, what am I going to see? What's going to be the situation? Are the kids going to be running around or whatever? And so I drove past one of those banks that has the time and temperature, and it had the temperature up there. It was depressingly cold. I know that. And then the time came up and it said 9:33. And I was like, wait a minute, 9:30, that's PM. It's 9:33 p.m. and I'm just now going home.
Oh, yeah.
And so I just got flooded with all of these thoughts. I got to thinking, okay, the kids are in bed. The older kids are probably still awake, but by this time they're in their bedroom doing their thing, And Sue has already put supper in the fridge, so I'm going to have to nuke my supper. And I just had this thought, and I think I actually said the words out loud. What in the world am I doing right now? What am I doing? Why am I doing this?
Yeah.
And so it was kind of like a frustration that hit me, as well as a realization that something has got to change. I can't just keep doing this where I'm not seeing my kids, I'm not present for my family. And it was a very emotional moment. And if I think about it for too awful long, even now, I can get very emotional about that moment. And I think I came home and said something to Sue about like, we've got to do something different here. And we didn't know what that was going to be, but that kind of is what started the process of us saying, let's try this e-commerce business and just see if we can grow it to the point where it can be full time. We had many of those discussions that we've kind of referenced here earlier of like, how much money can we cut from the budget and how many months of expenses do we need to have in the bank account and how quickly can we get that to that point? So we just started like this extreme hustle mode. But yeah, that moment was super key for us to really make that decision about, I don't know what this is going to look like, but something's going to change.
Yeah. And I think too, having the strong enough relationship to know that we could handle whatever was going to come our way, and also just being secure in the Lord. We've talked a lot about through the years of entrepreneurship, because there's lots of roller coastery times. We've talked about that as hard as Larry works and as great of a job as he does with everything, I don't really trust in him as my provider. I'm trusting in the Lord as my provider, and he uses Larry to do it. And so having that trust, I can be just 100% confident. Everything's going to be fine.
Good. And that takes the pressure off the guy too, because as guys, we're like, oh man, we feel that pressure. And if your wife puts it on you, which they're not meaning to, but you feel it. And so that's brilliant what you just said there, is get the ladies to realize that it's God. And then the man has to say, well, they have to trust in God too. We as guys have to also, God is our source.
Well, in Proverbs 31, it references that she laughs at the future. And I don't necessarily expect that that's because she just knows everything is going to be perfect into the future, but it's just it's a calm confidence in God that he is going to provide. And Sue is much more risk tolerant than probably most ladies. And I'm more risk adverse probably than most guys. So we kind of reverse roles in that a little bit. But there's times where I've just even said, just kind of on this topic here, I've said, like, I feel like I'm failing because I'm not providing enough. And that's whenever Sue will just be like, just stop. Just stop. She's been very good at balancing me out. Again, back to that whole thing of how we are one and we balance each other out in some of these type of things. So,
that's so good. So people can find you. I got your link, gen224marriage.com/connect.
Yes.
Get those connect cards. How many are there? There's a ton. I scrolled through.
I think it's like 56 or something.
Amazing.
It's almost 2 months worth. Yeah.
That's so cool.
It's enough to get the conversation rolling, and then you can probably take it from there. But yeah.
And again, just encouraging, especially the guys, because you're going to be like, I got to share my feelings. And, this can be like super low pressure. Literally just take a couple of minutes to get started on this. And if you've got young children, I know that can be a real challenge. Something that we had heard years ago in a parenting training is just something called couch time. We've kind of changed that a little bit to call it connection time. And just to say to your kids, like, hey, mommy and daddy's relationship is really important. And we are going to take 10 to 15 minutes here and we're going to have uninterrupted time. All right. And so that always means like under
Yeah.
time, unless.
Unless it's bleeding or something is unless there's blood or something is bending where it shouldn't. You can interrupt us for that, or flames, but otherwise, leave us alone.
And so the young kids are going to have a hard time with that at the beginning.
Yes.
Sure,
They just
sure.
are.
Yeah.
But it's good for them also. It's good for them
Yeah.
to see that as a husband and wife, that is a priority relationship. It actually gives a lot of security for children.
Mhm.
And so maybe the first time you do it, you're going to get 37 seconds in,
Yeah.
it's okay, but keep doing that. And every day is really important, and maybe have a certain time of day, dinner time, or right after dinner time,
Mhm.
in the morning, just whatever works for you, but just low pressure. But it's super important. And I think that you'll find after, I don't know, maybe a week or two, something like that the kids are going to get the idea behind it.
Yeah.
And you as a couple are going to start really connecting at a deeper level.
Yeah.
Love it. So awesome. Yeah. So guys, go grab your free connection cards. Oh,
Yeah.
well, thank you guys for doing this. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Ryan. It was
Thanks
really
so
good
much.
to reconnect with you.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We'll talk soon.
All right.
All right.
Take
Thanks.
care.
Take care.